All right, welcome back, everybody. Today, we are going to do a deep dive into something that you may have heard whispered about on the golf course.
Oh, yeah.
It's this mysterious X factor.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, the secret ingredient for unlocking power in your swing. We're going to break it down today with insights from PGA pro Henrik Jensch.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those concepts that sounds simple on the surface, but when you really start to, peel back the layers,
Right.
there's a lot more to it than meets the eye.
Yeah, because we're not just talking about, how far you can turn your shoulders.
Right.
It's the relationship between your shoulder turn and your hip turn
Exactly, yeah.
and how that generates power. So
Yeah.
let's start with the basics. What exactly is X factor?
So technically, X factor is the angle between your shoulders and your pelvis when you look at a golfer from above. So picture this. You're standing on a ladder, looking down at someone about to tee off.
Okay.
Their shoulders are already slightly open to their hips, even before they swing. That's the starting point of the X factor.
Okay, so I'm picturing this overhead view.
Yeah.
Now, I always thought it was just about, like, subtracting how much your hips turn from how much your shoulders turn. Is that about right?
Well, it's not quite that simple because we're talking about a three-dimensional movement.
Hmm.
So imagine trying to wring out a wet towel. You're not just twisting one end. You're creating this spiral motion throughout the entire towel.
Okay.
That's kind of what's happening with your body during the golf swing. And so simple subtraction doesn't capture that spiraling dynamic tension.
Ah, I see. So it's not just about the amount of rotation, it's about the relationship between those rotations.
Exactly, yeah. And that relationship changes throughout your swing, which is where things get really interesting. As you go into your backswing, that X factor, that angle that we talked about, gets bigger, increasing the tension.
So it's like you're winding up a spring.
That's a great analogy. It's all about building potential energy, like pulling back a slingshot. Now, here's where it gets really cool. You'd think that X factor would decrease immediately when you start your downswing, right?
Yeah.
Like letting go of that
And
slingshot.
that's where all the power comes from.
Right.
Unwinding from the top.
But actually, the opposite happens. The
Okay.
X factor continues to increase during the downswing. It's kind of counterintuitive, I know.
Wait, hold on. It gets bigger as you swing down.
It does.
My mind is blown.
Yeah.
I'm assuming there's a good reason for this.
There is, yeah. It has to do with how your hips and shoulders move. Your hips start to rotate forward first, which further stretches those core muscles and increases the X factor. And then, bam, all that stored energy is released as your upper body whips through impact with incredible speed.
So it's like you're winding the spring even tighter before letting it fly. That makes sense.
Exactly, yeah.
But definitely not what I expected.
It's one of those things that makes the golf swing so fascinating. It's not just a simple unwind. It's this dynamic dance between winding and unwinding, stretching and releasing.
And I bet this is where the concept of X-fix stretch comes in, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
Jensch talks about how this stretch is part of what's called the stretch-shortening cycle, which is a fancy way of saying that your muscles can generate more power when they're stretched before they contract. So think about jumping. You don't just stand straight up and jump. You bend your knees first, right?
Right.
To create that pre-stretch.
You gotta load up.
Same idea with the golf swing.
So stretch, shorten cycle, like preloading the muscles.
Exactly. And it's a key reason why golfers dip slightly during their downswing. They're further stretching those core muscles before firing them to unleash that powerful rotation.
Wow, it's amazing how much is going on in just a fraction of a second. So we're talking about this complex interplay between shoulder and hip rotation, this stretching, this releasing, all leading to a more powerful swing.
Yeah.
But how much of a difference does this X factor really make for, like, us everyday golfers?
Yeah.
I mean, I get it's important for, the pros, but, like, can understanding this really help, someone like me shave strokes off their game?
Absolutely, yeah. It's not just theory. It's about, unlocking your own potential. So think about it. If you want to hit the ball farther and with more consistency, you need to understand how to generate that powerful coil and release. And X factor is the key to doing just that.
Okay, so knowing about this X factor, it gives me, like, the tools to actually improve my swing, not just, marvel at how the pros do it.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the goal. And to kind of illustrate that, let's dive into some data from the PGA and LPGA tours to see how the pros are actually using X factor. So at the top of the backswing, the average X factor for men is about 50 degrees. For women, it's slightly higher, around 56 degrees.
Interesting. So I'm guessing that difference has to do with, like, flexibility?
Yeah.
Women tend to be more flexible, so maybe that allows for a greater X factor stretch in the backswing.
You got it. Flexibility plays a big role in how much you can coil during your swing. And here's another intriguing point. The average X factor at impact is actually larger than at the top of the backswing.
Hold on, really? I thought we were talking about like unwinding at impact.
Yeah.
Why would it be getting bigger?
Remember that X factor stretch we discussed?
Yeah.
During the downswing, the pelvis starts rotating forward first, and this actually increases the X factor momentarily before everything releases. It's like adding one final twist to that towel before you really wring out the water.
Okay, so it's not just about, how far you turn your shoulders, it's how your hips and shoulders work together to create that, dynamic tension and then release it at just the right moment. My brain is starting to hurt a little.
Yeah.
In a good way.
Yeah, it's a lot to take in, but understanding these concepts can be a game changer. You might realize you're not getting enough X factor stretch in your backswing, which means you're not storing enough energy. Or maybe you're releasing too early, which could be costing you accuracy and distance.
So it's about finding that like sweet spot, that perfect balance between tension and release. But what happens after impact? Does the X factor just keep increasing?
Actually, no. So while the X factor continues to close as you move through the downswing, even at impact, the chest is still slightly lagging behind the pelvis. And then by the time you reach the finish position, the X factor actually opens up again.
Wait, so it goes from increasing to decreasing. What causes that shift?
It all comes back to the rotation of the pelvis. So think about it. Your hips don't turn as much as your upper body when you swing, especially as you complete the motion. So even though the X factor has been closing throughout the downswing, that difference in rotation between the shoulders and pelvis at the finish means there's still a significant X factor, but now it's open instead of closed.
Okay, I think I'm starting to see like the bigger picture here. It's this constant interplay between, the shoulders and the pelvis.
Yeah.
This ebb and flow of like tension and release. But I have to admit, it's pretty mind-blowing to think that even at impact, there's still that element of like lag between the upper and lower body.
Yeah, it is pretty remarkable, isn't it? And it just highlights, the incredible complexity of the golf swing. We often think of it as this like, simple fluid motion, but there's so much happening beneath the surface.
Absolutely. And, that's what makes this deep dive so fascinating. We're really like peeling back the layers and getting into the nitty-gritty of how the body generates power and speed.
Yeah.
But let's bring it back to our listeners for a moment. Why should they care about X Factor? How can this knowledge actually help them on the course?
Yeah.
So what does this all mean for, someone who wants to take their golf game to the next level?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is that X Factor isn't just about raw shoulder turn. It's about creating that dynamic tension between your upper and lower body, like winding up a powerful spring.
Right.
And that stretch-shorten cycle that we talked about, that's what allows you to really unleash that energy at impact.
Right. It's not just about, brute force. It's about like coordinating your movements, finding that sweet spot where everything clicks in place. And honestly, I've been thinking about my own swing as we've been talking. And I'm realizing I probably haven't been paying enough attention to my X factor.
Yeah. It's funny you say that because a lot of golfers make that same realization. They get so focused on other aspects of their swing
Right.
that they forget about this a fundamental principle.
Yeah. It's easy to get caught up in all the like technical details.
Yeah.
Right. But sometimes it's about, going back to the basics and understanding how our bodies really move.
Absolutely. Yeah. So if there's one thing I want our listeners to take away from this deep dive, it's this. Think about your own swing. Are you maximizing your X factor? Are you feeling that coil in your backswing? Are you releasing at the right moment? What adjustments could you make to create more tension and unleash that power?
Yeah, it's all about experimenting, right? Getting out there on the course, trying different things, feeling how your body responds, and finding what works best for you.
Exactly. Yeah. Golf is a game of constant learning and refinement.
Yeah.
And the more you understand the mechanics of the swing,
Yeah.
the more you can unlock your true potential.
Yeah, I love that. So go there and experiment. Play around with your X factor. See what happens when you focus on, that coiled spring effect. And most importantly, have fun.
And let us know what you discover. We're
Yeah.
always eager to hear about your golfing adventures.
That's it for our deep dive on the X factor. Until next time, happy golfing, everyone.